Okay, so we're diving into global finance today.
Right.
Specifically, how India is navigating the space, especially with the World Bank.
Sounds interesting.
We've got a really fascinating mix of sources for this deep dive.
Oh,
Yeah. So first, we'll be looking at an interview with someone who could be a World Bank senior official soon.
okay.
And they've got firsthand knowledge of India's banking system.
Interesting.
And then we also have this really in-depth report by the IMF and the World Bank.
Uh-huh.
And that's all about analyzing how India supervises their banking system.
So it's like we're getting a view from both the inside and the outside.
Yeah.
That should be valuable.
Yeah. Are you ready to uncover some surprising facts about India's journey, their successes and challenges?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, so first up, India is making some incredible strides with financial inclusion.
Okay.
You know, this potential World Bank senior official we're hearing from,
Yeah.
they really highlight India's progress in reducing poverty and making banking accessible to way more people.
What's really impressive is they didn't just expand access.
Right.
They had a real laser focus on actually reducing poverty.
How so?
Well, they implemented all these programs like direct benefit transfers,
Mm-hmm.
and they expanded microfinance initiatives too.
Smart.
And the results speak for themselves.
What kind of results?
Well, poverty in India dropped from 21% in 2011 all the way to 10% by 2021.
Wow, that's a massive shift in just a decade.
Exactly.
And get this, a whopping 80% of Indians now have access to banking services.
Yeah, and that's where things get even more interesting.
Oh, how so?
Well, a big part of that success is thanks to all these government-backed digital initiatives.
Like what?
Well, like the India Stack.
The India Stack.
It's basically a digital infrastructure for things like identity, payments, and data sharing.
So it's like a foundation for all sorts of digital interaction.
Exactly. And it's been a game changer for financial inclusion.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, imagine all the possibilities that opens up.
Right. For individuals, for businesses, for the whole economy, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so India's clearly making great progress.
Huh?
But this interview also brings up some global challenges.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, according to them, there are two really big threats looming out there.
Okay.
Rising global debt and all the volatility that's spurred by climate change.
Oh, man. Yeah, those are both big ones.
Yeah, so global debt actually hit a staggering 256% of GDP in 2022.
Oh, wow.
Think about how much strain that puts on economies, especially in low-income countries.
Yeah, that's a massive number.
It's like the whole world is living on borrowed time.
Right.
And then climate change just adds another whole layer of complexity on top of that.
Absolutely.
So how does climate change add to it?
Well, I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Climate events can disrupt supply chains,
Right.
impact agricultural yields, even lead to mass displacement of people.
Yeah.
And all of that has huge economic consequences.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where does the World Bank fit into all of this?
Well, the interviewee argues that the World Bank has a super crucial role to play in finding solutions.
Okay.
They advocate for debt restructuring for struggling nations.
To ease their financial burden?
Exactly.
Okay.
And they also suggest innovative financial mechanisms,
Okay.
like things like green debt swaps.
Green debt swaps. I haven't heard of that. What is that?
It's actually a pretty clever concept.
Oh.
So imagine you have a country that's super burdened by all this debt,
Okay.
and they're also committed to all these environmental projects.
Okay.
So a green debt swap basically lets them exchange a portion of that existing debt
Okay.
for a commitment to invest in those green projects.
Interesting.
So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, so you're reducing debt A&D, promoting sustainability.
Exactly.
That's a pretty ingenious way to address those multiple challenges at once.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is,
Mm-hmm.
global finance, the environment, development.
They all play off each other.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's take a closer look at India's banking system itself then. All right. That's where this IMF World Bank report comes in.
Okay.
It gives us a very detailed analysis of how India supervises its banks.
Cool.
And the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, plays a key role in all of this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what does the report say about them?
Well, they commend the RBI for a couple of things.
Like what?
Well, one is adopting this risk-based approach to supervision,
Okay.
and the other is implementing the Basel III framework.
Basel III framework.
Yeah, it basically sets international standards for banking regulations.
Oh, okay.
And it's all about making sure banks have enough capital to weather any financial storms.
So that they can manage their risks effectively and just maintain overall financial stability.
Exactly.
It's a pretty big deal for India to be integrated into that global financial system.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So it sounds like India is making some positive moves to strengthen their banking system.
Yeah, they are. But the report also points to a few areas of concern.
Oh, like what?
Well, specifically around the RBI's independence,
Oh.
especially when it comes to supervising those public sector banks.
Public sector banks, yeah.
So if the RBI is potentially facing pressure from outside forces,
Right.
can they really hold all L banks accountable equally?
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and the report highlights some limitations on the RBI's authority over those public sector banks.
Like what?
Well, for instance, the RBI faces hurdles when it comes to removing directors or even forcing mergers,
Oh, wow.
even if it's deemed necessary.
So how can a regulator be truly effective if they don't have the power to enforce those decisions?
Exactly. It's critical.
Yeah, so that actually brings us to a really key challenge that's facing India's financial landscape.
What's that?
Non-performing assets,
Or NPAs.
NPAs, right? And both sources actually acknowledge that this has been a pretty persistent issue for India.
Yeah, it's been a struggle.
So what's the story there with these NPAs?
Well, the IMF World Bank report goes into a lot of detail
Oh, good.
about the RBI's multi-pronged approach to tackling NPAs.
Oh.
And one key initiative was this system-wide asset quality review.
Or AQR.
Yeah, the AQR back in 2015.
Okay.
It was a massive undertaking just to assess how bad the NPAs actually were in the whole banking system.
So they were trying to get a really clear picture of the problem.
Exactly.
What did they find?
Well, the AQR actually revealed a pretty significant level of optimism in how those NPAs were being recognized and classified.
Optimism, huh?
Yeah, so there's a lot of underreporting going on
Uh-huh.
and underprovisioning,
Meaning?
meaning banks weren't accurately reflecting the potential losses from these bad loans.
So it was like a big wake-up call for everybody.
You could say that.
Yeah, so what happened next? How did they address that?
Well, it highlighted the need for way more transparency
Okay.
and stricter enforcement of the loan classification and provisioning rules.
So how did the RBI respond?
They got serious.
Okay.
They tightened up all the regulations,
Uh-huh.
withdrew regulatory forbearance,
Regulatory forbearance.
which had basically allowed banks to kind of classify certain loans however they wanted.
Oh, so they were being lenient.
Yeah. And then the RBI implemented stricter provisioning requirements.
Okay.
And all of that was aimed at getting a more realistic picture of the bank's financial health.
And incentivizing them to actually deal with those NPOs head on.
Exactly. It was a much more proactive approach
Yeah.
instead of just ignoring the problem.
Sweeping it under the rug.
Exactly.
And the potential World Bank senior official basically echoes this sentiment, stresses the importance of having realistic loan classifications and those provisioning practices.
Yeah, because if banks aren't classifying those loans accurately
Right.
and setting aside enough provisions for potential losses,
Yeah.
it creates a distorted picture of how financially healthy they really are.
Like they're doing better than they actually are.
Exactly. And then that discourages them from tackling those NPAs in the first place.
It's like ignoring a leak in the roof.
Right. Eventually, it's going to cause some serious damage.
Yeah. Exactly. So it sounds like addressing those NPAs requires a few things.
Yeah, like what?
Like regulatory oversight,
Well,
stricter accounting practices,
yeah,
and just a real willingness from banks to face the music.
absolutely. And speaking of facing the music,
Yeah.
this potential World Bank official sees a really powerful role for technology in addressing all these global challenges and promoting development.
Oh, yeah. They seem pretty passionate about the potential of technology in finance.
Oh, definitely.
Like what kind of things do they see?
Well, they envision blockchain playing a huge role in ensuring the integrity of those financial transactions,
Okay.
especially in those developing countries.
Interesting.
Imagine a world where every single dollar of aid or investment can be tracked
Wow.
transparently,
Okay.
from the source to the recipient.
Okay.
So that minimizes the risk of corruption and leakage.
That would be a huge game changer for development initiatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not just about the money getting there, but making sure it's used for what it was intended for.
Exactly. And that's not all.
Oh.
They also see AI as a super powerful tool
Okay.
for refining risk assessments for those investments.
Okay.
Imagine AI analyzing massive amounts of data
Yeah.
to identify those high-impact sustainable projects.
And then helping to direct that funding where it's needed the most.
Exactly.
That's a huge leap forward.
It is.
But technology alone can't solve everything, right? We
Okay.
still need effective ways to measure the impact of all these different initiatives.
You're absolutely right. And that's where our interviewee emphasizes a multidimensional approach
Okay.
to assessing the impact of those World Bank projects.
So it's not just about crunching numbers, like looking at GDP growth.
Exactly.
They believe in using both.
Both quantitative data,
Yeah.
like income levels, job creation, infrastructure improvements, and qualitative indicators.
Qualitative indicators. So like what are we talking about there?
Think about things like community well-being
Okay.
or improvements in health and education,
Uh-huh.
access to clean water and sanitation.
All of those are harder to quantify,
For sure.
but they speak volumes about the real-world impact on people's lives.
It's about getting the whole picture,
Exactly.
looking beyond just the economic bottom line.
Precisely. And they give a really compelling example. A
Oh,
World Bank study actually found that infrastructure projects in Southeast Asia
okay.
not only boosted the regional GDP by an average of 3%,
Okay, that's good.
but it also significantly improved access to education and healthcare for millions and millions of people.
Wow, that's impressive.
It shows that these development initiatives can have a ripple effect.
Affecting so many different aspects of life.
Exactly.
But that brings us to a pretty critical question.
What's that?
How do we accurately measure the long-term sustainable impact of these initiatives?
That is a big question.
How do we know if they're actually creating short-term gains
Yeah.
or truly contributing to lasting positive change?
It's a question we need to keep in mind as we continue this deep dive.
Absolutely. There's still a lot more to uncover in these sources. Oh, yeah, we've barely scratched the surface. So we're back.
We will back with its part 2. Stay tuned and keep watching.